like to hear your take, of course, in the budget speech, different reactions that are there as well. There are those that thought that the budget will be very graceful for many, perhaps in its demeanor, if you like, in its expression, if you will. Was it like that? Has it been like that? That there would be a lot of giving, there would be a lot of gifting? Was it like that? That's not the sense many got. From the expert's point of view, it has still been maybe a responsible one, maybe the one that speaks to the circumstances that it has always been speaking to. But of course, there are still some areas of concerns in terms of the allocations that are made and the priorities therefore. But let's stay on the budget and let's get reactions. Let's bring in Mr. Miyelani Holeni, who joins us on the line there. He is with ISO Consulting. He is Group Chief Advisor. Mr. Holeni, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, and good evening to the listeners.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. What is your overall takeaway from the budget speech?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the job of the finance minister is not to inspire, but is to bring discipline into the fiscus. The finance minister had a very tight rope to walk with regards to balancing the many requirements that the country has. On the one side, the social issues; in the middle, the issues of infrastructure; and on the extreme side, the issues of growth and attraction of investment. So in terms of what the minister had to do, it's business as usual, no fireworks, no departure from the discipline, except for dipping into the gold and foreign exchange reserve, which I think is the most dramatic issue. But that in itself addresses a shortage as opposed to a positive growth aspect.
Well, let's talk about that. So that is to address and to lessen our borrowing when we have deficits?
Not really. That is to balance the budget because what has been happening and where we are in terms of borrowings, the borrowings that can be accounted for right now that we are paying 1.2 billion rands in interest daily, have gone to finance operational issues such as wages, the public wage bill, grants, and all of those things that don't necessarily bring growth into the economy. So even the 150 billion that the finance minister has tabled a bill to dip into the reserve will equally go into those sort of aspects, because on the one hand, we have a huge social package. We still have health and NHI to finance, and in between financing of smaller amounts going to small medium enterprises or entrepreneurs. On the other end, we need to make sure that we keep the lights on. So that money essentially is not going for growth. It's not for a growth oriented, but is to close whatever the deficits are that are in the budget. And the budget deficit, I think, at the last count was sitting at about 4%. Well, the minister promises to narrow that budget deficit, but the total debt that you're sitting with is almost a trillion rand.
Yeah.
So I think there's a choice to make here as to deplete the reserves and risk the volatility of the currency, or to chart a new path forward, which creates localization, beneficiation, as well as industrialization that is so desperately needed.
Because I thought I heard him say that in the coming 2-3 years, our debts will decrease. And of course, the other thing is, as we get this money and spend on these things, it will avoid us going to borrow to be able to fund whatever different needs that would have. But the projection is our debt would decrease in the coming years.
Well, that is great news, I think, from where the intent is. What we need to be vigilant about is that intent going to translate? How do we make sure that intention and it's a noble intention from the finance minister, may I add, but will it be followed through to ensure that money does not get diverted as the other needs of the government arise? Because that is what we have seen in the past, where other needs and pressing and urgent issues arise, and that causes a deviation from what the course is that we're following. The second issue is that this is the final budget of the sixth administration. What we don't know is who gets to return back to office. Will they continue along the trajectory that the current administration was on, or is there going to be a change for the better or for the worse? The one thing to also add as a third aspect is I think government at times can behave, and maybe this is a harsh word, a bit schizophrenic, because they forget, what the other part, is doing, and there are many competing needs, and there is a sometimes, interest in terms of one meeting their own plans at the expense of the greater plan of the country. So that is the test that dipping into the gold foreign exchange reserve fund is going to have to go through. So the intent of the minister is noble, and we respect it. But how is it going to be taken through into the system?
We'll always talk about Eskom in as long as it's linked largely to growth in the country, and the government is continuing to invest there.
Well, the conversation around, Eskom is one that at this stage, there's fatigue in terms of listening to the fixes and the things that are being done to Eskom, which seem to have marginal gains. No doubt there's a lot of work going into fixing of Eskom, but, we want to see the results as opposed to the conversations and the talks and the plans and so on. We want to, all of us want to see a healthy Eskom that delivers electricity, that contributes to the growth in the economy, because single-handedly Eskom has been one of the inhibitors of growth as well as the attraction of investment. So if Eskom is working, we will be able to solve part of the growth story. When Transnet and the logistics of the country are working, we are solving another part of the puzzle that is inhibiting us. All that we would need to solve now is to deal with the issue of enterprise within the country and getting more enterprise happening even at a local level within municipalities.
Yeah. And investment on infrastructure programs?
Well, we welcome as well the reconfiguration of the investment, public infrastructure financing. It's going to obviously go through quite, a bit of a litmus test. We have also seen as well how the Triple P policy has been revamped as well. So those are aspects that, are sounding right in the ears of the investors. But we also want to see the action and the follow-through from all of that. So the issue here, Chauke, is not because we are doubtful of what the statements are that are being mentioned at the governmental level.
Yes.
But we struggle with implementing all of these plans so that, they produce the intention that they were meant for in the first place. So let's focus on implementation. And I think the advice from certainly my quarter and the quarters of, many other people, for instance, from Diesel Consulting is, can we focus on implementing plans and one plan and not multiple plans, but one plan that whether it's read from the president to the finance minister to everyone, but it must be a single plan that we are implementing. We should not be fighting to implement, small little plans that do not align or coordinate to create a bigger result.
What is your take on the social spending?
Well, I think the social spending does a lot to alleviate poverty. In the absence of a growing economy, in the presence of increasing unemployment, the social package goes a long way towards having a stopgap measure. It is almost like that last person who is able to hold the door back so that the wolf cannot go into the house and destroy the household. So that is what it is. It's a stopgap measure. It should not be used as a sustainable package because it gets the economy to be lethargic. Instead, we want a working population that is economically active to be working, whether it's in the informal sector, whether it's the formal sector, it matters not, but you want a working population being involved in the production within the economy. So the social package is one that we look at, but the more you increase the social package, the more of a burden it will have ultimately on the need to borrow or to balance the budget.
Yeah. So there's been relief on the fuel levy. Well, let's talk about the position on tax overall.
Well, I think, the issue of tax, of course, the minister stressed the fact that if they adjust tax brackets, it's not to raise income. And the issue around, taxation is that personal income tax is at the top in terms of where we are being taxed, business tax similarly, and so on. So there is not a lot of room to be moving around, from a tax, point of view, except for the sin taxes that have been increased. Those, in some ways, add to the fiscus and the amount that is required. So initially, the shortfall, or the minister was looking for 15 billion. He has been able to identify areas from a taxation point of view to close the 15 billion. But he actually got more because he's also dipping into the gold and foreign exchange reserve fund, which gets him around another 150 billion to deal, with whatever the pressing matter. So in this case, I think taxation, we have gone to a point where you can't increase taxes. We are glad it did not touch the likes of VAT. We are glad it did not increase markedly other taxes from within the various personal as well as the business. However, I think the sources of revenue for government must be re-looked at, because there's only two ways I think you can increase revenue for government. It's to slow down spending, or to increase and find other streams of revenue that government will be able to take advantage of.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you.